Hi everyone, this is Product Mind with my partners Ted and Ezinne. And today we are talking about the hype cycle of artificial intelligence. Over the last few days, a lot of articles came out about how the AI uh, hype, the bubble is busting on the back of the recent launches. And we have some thoughts. So we're first going to kick it off to Ted. Ted is the no bullshit guy. He's going to talk about his what he thinks about all this recent news.
Yeah. So everyone knows about the MIT study, and if you
Everyone,
don't
why don't you
know,
tell us? Why don't you tell
yeah.
us?
Well, if you don't know, they basically said 95% of the enterprise spend on Gen AI is BS and has not resulted in any meaningful ROI. And that the big flashy headline you've seen pretty much everywhere. A couple of good analyses that are out there that kind of dig into a little bit more, and that's where we're going here. But the headline is scary, right? And on the heels of that, you also saw no less than Mark Zuckerberg saying, "Whoa, hold on a second. I just spent all these billions acqui-hiring all these people. Maybe I gotta sort out how the sandbox works, and maybe I need to chill my roll a little bit." And whatever. And then of course everybody experienced what happened with GPT-5. With Hype Master Altman, pushing everything as he always does, right? But unfortunately, this time fell a little bit flat, more than a little bit flat, and they had to go back and not just release some old models, which is an interesting admission about progress of technology, but also it shattered the mythos in people's minds that higher version number equals awesomer, right? Closer to AGI, right? This is just going to fix all of my problems. Well, no, actually, five in some ways, as they admit, not as good as 4.0 and some of the prior models. So all of this, you throw it into the mix, and what do you get? You get disillusionment. You get the popping of the hype bubble.
Yes, and actually just on that, the GPT-5 thing sort of threw me for a loop a bit. Like I guess there was all this hype about we're closer to AGI and it wasn't. And they had this perplexing thing where they released the OSS models as a 120 billion parameter model and a 20 billion
Yeah.
parameter model. And it was an acknowledgement that I read somewhere that the OSS models are just 9 months behind the big ones in the data centers, the open source ones that you can run in Olama. And I started
Yep.
thinking about that. I'm like, wow, wait, what? And I saw a stat from YC that said 90% of all the new YC applicants are using open source Chinese models in
Yeah.
their prototypes,
Yeah. And Andreessen
right?
Horowitz said the same thing, right? Which
Which,
is
like,
overwhelming percentage.
and that is like 3% of the data center spend of the other ones, right?
Yeah. It's
And
huge.
so all, all this stuff is sort of a harbinger of like, hey, wait a second, like this thing's not going to go the way people thought it was, and the way the Pied Pipers are telling us they're going to go. And we're going to talk a little bit about maybe the different aspects of the implications of this. Isn't it? Do you just before we go on, just kicking off to you a little bit, like any thoughts on just like all these emerging things?
It's always interesting for me to study these things. Most of you know, I tend to look for patterns across industries, across time, and in practical terms, just seeing the companies at YC, the A16Z type blogs, and figuring and learning that what everybody is buzzing about isn't often the actual value being created. And I'm just paying attention because it's always silly if you make the mistakes of the past years. You guys were talking earlier, and I said, hey, let's take a look at what happened in Web 3.0. Let's take a look at what happened the internet and see what we can glean from that and try to figure out what is truly happening as we enter this, what we're all saying now, the pullback of capital. That is usually the signal, right? That we're entering into this thing where there's a new filter is being created. So I think that's kind of where we are. And I'm excited to talk about what the takeaways can be, given where we all believe we are. I hope that makes sense. I hope y'all are like catching what I'm throwing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit about the players? We don't want to think everyone is a monolith, right? And so one of the things that we try to do is get really specific. Who are all the different people that at least care about what if the hype cycle isn't going the way it should be. And so I want to throw out a couple you guys throw in. One I think about is obviously just investors. When they invest in the S&P 500 and the big seven who are sort of have a lock. Facebook has a huge amount of money to spend on super intelligence, personal super intelligence, and the surface areas of WhatsApp, the AI Friends Initiative, and so on and so forth. And let's forget about what they're doing on virtual reality because no one is talking about that. Microsoft has a lock on OpenAI and they have an incestuous relationship that is also contractual. Apple is developing on-device AI, but also borrowing from OpenAI in terms of licensing. NVIDIA is running away with the market. AMD is chasing. And people are investing knowing that there's going to be value in these companies. That's one group. But there's also groups like us, the companies we advise. And some are builders very early, and they're building with AI at the core, and they're trying to. And there are people who didn't build with AI at the core at the edge, or they're trying to figure out how to get to AI at the core. And then we have enterprises who are like, oh my God, AI is going to do this thing to us. It's like ordnance. If we don't get it, someone else is going to get it and they're going to eat our lunch. So Fortune 500 is like, we need AI projects. We got to spend money on AI projects. I know I'm probably not exhaustive. Any other people you think of who are part of this circle?
Hey, there's so many different players here, right? I mean, obviously because even when you talk about the enterprise, they employ people, right? And this is, some cases we're seeing tech companies and enterprises letting people go. In our minds early, okay, especially developers are letting people go early because they're saying that this technology is going to replace it, right?
Too early. They don't know the solution and they're getting rid of people right now.
Right. I mean, people are expensive, of course, right? So
yeah, but guys, we know what companies are there to make a profit. And again, it's all about how do we optimize today to look good so that, the stock market rewards us if you are in the stock market. And we see this. So, Audrey, I think you've
So that sounds
covered it.
nefarious. I think that sounds nefarious. You're saying, no, it does. Because what you're saying is other people are shedding people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know why, but we think it's AI. We need to shed people for Wall Street's perception, even though we don't know that an AI can replace our coder.
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely, that's true.
Yes. Going back to the main topic. Yeah, it's not that, guys. I always say, we're adults, right? Let's behave like the adults, right? This is what, unfortunately, it's what companies are for. So you being able to understand what the truth is and adapting to that truth is really critical. You asked the question, do we think those are the breakdowns? Absolutely. I think the startups exist, the builders exist, the investors, the VCs, PEs for those small companies. And then there's the enterprise, right? But even within the enterprise, and then we have the investors. The question is it private market or public market? And the behaviors are really different there. But then within enterprise, I think that the use of AI, like you said, some folks are trying to protect their existing value creation and are trying to figure out that balance of, do I invest in old, invest in new? And there's so much confusion there. But then there are also enterprises that are trying to figure out what I talk about, which is how do we take our OpEx down, right? How do we make investments in companies that can reduce the customer success spend, reduce the customer support spend, reduce developer costs? So I think there are different layers to this trough of disillusionment or the pullback on investment. I think that we will see the operational expenditure, the things that the use cases for operational expenditure, I think we'll see that continue. It doesn't mean it doesn't come without risk. Because when you think about it, these people are entwining themselves with companies that solve problems. Great. And that's what you want when you're in the trough of disillusionment, quote unquote. You want to have a core use case. You don't want to be one of those that have slapped AI on top and have gotten rewarded just because you slapped AI on top. So people are making investments, chatbots, et cetera, building their entire design of their organization with these things in place. Great. The issue, though, is the people they are choosing, right? The choices that they're making. Will those companies exist tomorrow? Will they exist in a couple months from now? Because now, rewind, those companies are startups, right? And they are dependent on Anthropic, or they're dependent on OpenAI. And have they chosen to use an open source OSS model or not, right? So those are the type of things that we're going to try to work through. And some of them will go bust, some of them will not. And companies need to be aware of what's happening there, in as much as they need to be aware of how will AI in fact impact their own business and value creation. So two things to watch at the same time as we enter this space.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, right? It impacts differently. And, you know, I think what you're saying about enterprise is this is not different than anything else that you do. And in fact, the toughest part of enterprise, right, is implementation. It's execution, as we say, right? Execution is the key. It's the most important freaking thing. And this is because risk and change management, right? You are in an enterprise, in any organization, you've got an incumbency. Okay, you're doing your job right now in some fashion, and it is the C-suite and the board's job to say, can we do it better? Right? Of course, right? And if this new technology is like, oh, this magic dust is going to make everything better. Okay, great. So now what are our choices, right? So we've got all these like expensive technologists. Let's go get those guys to do it. And those guys are not going to say no. They're going to say, give me more budget, boss, and I'm going to kick gas for you. And then at the same time, as Ezinne says, other companies are saying, people are beating down the door trying to sell you stuff, saying, I can fix this problem for you too, right?
Yeah.
So you've got both of those factors happening at the same time.
Two truths. Operationally, it will make you better. The question is by how much, and then what support do you need? Are you letting go of the people that you will need? So I think that's when we said we're going to talk about the different personas and how this all impacts them. I think that it's really true on the operational side for enterprise companies, even for startups. AI is actually going to drive operational efficiency. Bar none. We know that. It's just to what degree, right? So I feel comfortable with that group. I don't think there'll be much disruption as long as people are aware that the risks of their investments and how they choose to entwine themselves, I think that's manageable. I don't know how you
Let
feel.
me try to, because I'm learning a lot from both of you, but let me see if I can sort of headline it, if that's okay.
Thank
You
you.
should grade me. I think you're saying that enterprises, maybe Fortune 1000 or whatever it is, they are engaging with AI in different ways, and a lot of them are failing. The failure rate between operational efficiency and sort of creating new products is different. Operational efficiency is actually where people are seeing the most success. Creating new things, because that requires sort of newness, changing people their teams and their capabilities. That's been harder. That's what you're saying. You're also
Yeah.
saying that if you want to do operational, you should partner with someone outside who has high expertise. But even when you do that, you should be careful. Like one of the things we talk about is don't just buy the product. Let them create things that work with your system. Basically, they should create code versus, oh, I'm buying this chatbot. But they should things that integrate with your existing platform level in a way that is so that you can own it and extend it, even if they're not around. If that
Yep.
makes sense.
Yes.
And but in general, people are struggling because there's just a lack of really strong expertise. We're still very early in the process, and so
Right.
everything is bespoke
Yeah.
in many
Yeah. So
ways, right?
Right.
what I would underscore is that I have high confidence that a lot of the operational efficiency things are very sharp problems, things we've known for a while,
Yeah.
patterns that have emerged. What we don't know is how many people do we need to retain to continue to get the most and optimize and maximize value. And where people are
Mm,
making mistakes is in letting go of the people to shape that, who know it, et cetera, et cetera. One. The second is getting too entwined with other companies, external companies, because you should partner where you can,
mm,
making sure that they're doing such a way in terms of the implementation so they can pull back because there will be failures, right? Some of those companies will fail. So that's how I feel about the enterprise, and not just enterprise, mid-sized companies that are working to drive operational efficiency, particularly companies that have existed prior to this AI. I think that's the way to frame it. We will see operational efficiency, but they should be cautious in how they let go of people because that knowledge, right, of how the
mm,
company itself works matters. And once it's
hmm
out the door, it's out the door. So that's the core insight. And I think that's actually the safest, most known area here. When we start talking about what happens in this trough of disillusionment for others, then it's a little more interesting. And there are not that many known knowns.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little. Let's switch.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
Ted, go for it.
I'm just agreeing with this. I think that the article points out a couple of different things about the success rate, and one of them, and this has been reported, right, is that it's double for people who are doing unsexy things and who are using external vendors, right? So this is all in the line of what we're saying, and I think we're all kind of in violent agreement. I think what we've been sharing over the last 10 minutes is a deeper dive into that, right, than what you're reading in other places. Because I think the reasoning that we just said is a bit different than what I read, right?
Yes,
Because what I
yes.
read
The
is,
headline doesn't,
hey,
you have to read beyond the headline to actually
everything beyond the
see where
headlines,
the
right?
value is. Yeah,
Exactly. What I'm
yes.
reading is, hey, man, look at all this great technology that they have. Look at the VCs investing money in these startups. You definitely want to go use them. But that's not really the reason, right? I mean, that's our reason, right? But
Hmm.
again, the real reason is expertise, integration, change management, risk control, these kinds of things, and doing that carefully. And this is exactly what Ezinne says. The domain knowledge that you have, okay, that employees have, unfortunately, the expensive employees have, okay, is that they've locked up in here is may not be reflected in their day-to-day job. And this is where when you look at it in an aggregate level at a senior level and someone says, my God, I can just save 20% right off the line. I'm going to go cut some of these people here, right? Because you look at what they do in their day-to-day job and you forget that when you want to transform something, it's harder than doing the day-to-day operations, right? That is like just the absolute truth. Building the machine is more difficult than running the machine. And so now we're talking about building new machines. And this
And
is
we just tell
absolutely
CEOs and boards to stop jettisoning people for this stupid AI. Like, it's so annoying. Like, it's exactly what you said. They have so much institutional knowledge about how to serve your customers. And honestly, even if you wanted to use AI, you need the institutional knowledge to get the AI to be any good.
right.
Like, why are you doing it? Like, just because, oh, man, the quarterly reporting cycle is a mess.
It's
Honestly, we
It's
should
the
it's
just
quarter
change it.
reporting cycle, right?
the difference between, and I use this word, the developer and the architect, right? So good developers, right, who've done it can begin to truly pseudocode and design, and you still will need that no matter what. So even in the operational world, as AI does this, that, or the other, you put an agent here. Where do you put an agent versus a chatbot versus a this? Somebody has to design that, and some of these people are walking out the door. So I mean, again, if anybody, those who are listening, the insight we hope to produce here is, at least for the operational side of your investments right now, I think execution discipline is really important. And like really finessing and thinking about how you're going to apply AI across your your operations as a whole is actually important. And I think those are wins that can be enduring.
And we just say this. We think American business, yeah, we're that authoritative. We think they should just use AI to expand their ambition, right? They should expand the number of projects they try, the finesse and the quality that they have, and the custom fit to the customer it does. You can personalize. By the way, one of the great things we created last year when we were talking during the product leadership summit was to talk to people about what AI, the capabilities that you can use in 1,000 products or 1,000,000 products. And one was language. I'm reading off of the worksheet we created: language, communication, NLP plus plus, right? Better than machine learning. Multimedia content creation. Again, if you squint at that, you can see workflows in sales, workflows in marketing, workflows in customer success, personalization and customization. You can now, Formulas, we created software we believe could talk to 8 billion people in the way that they want it specifically. Data synthesis. So now
Mm-hmm.
you can throw data sets, it'll clean it for you, which would take you millions of dollars before, to a reasonable extent, and look at the data and problem solve, right? We talked a little bit about autonomy. Agents are coming. They're not very good, but eventually you'll be able to, like people in computers, I want to say something geeky, and so apologies for the people who are not. We've known what it means to fork a process. Within a main code, you start something that goes off and does something else and comes back. We're going to do this at a human scale with agents, right? And in the next couple of years, it'll be real. These are the fundamentals, right? But use it for ambition, not to cut people's livelihoods, for God's sakes. For God, like this is ridiculous. All right, I want to just pivot and maybe talk about maybe a couple of things. We've talked a little bit about early, frontier people. They need to build with AI at the core. Obviously, we talked about this before. We're saying that enterprise needs to be careful where they direct it to, who they partner with, how they do it, right? And if we want more detail, we can talk to you about it. But now, I guess, let's go back up to the companies that are benefiting from this, the big seven who have been benefiting from stock stuff. We know that the NVIDIA CEO has been dumping stock. It's so embarrassing. It's really unseemly. Um, Microsoft seems to be set up for success either way this thing goes. Can we talk a little bit about that and sort of are these harbingers of anything? Like what's going on?
A couple things, right? I mean, look, if you're Jensen and you're sitting on I think $100+ billion, I think you can diversify a little bit. I mean, what the hell? I mean, it might be better for the entire
You know
planet
what?
to
You're an old
diversify.
hedge fund guy. That is true. Your hedge fund guy is telling you why the hell are you 99% concentrated in one thing, even if it's yours.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, whatever. You've already got more money than, pretty much everyone else except for like two people. What's going on? Anyway, but no, it is a point that I think that for the Microsoft, right? I think that's the most important point, and obviously, I think you're both more qualified to talk about them. But than I am. However, the ad tech bubble to me is a very good mirror here of what is going on, right? So for those of you who don't know, Microsoft was late to the ad tech space, right? So they had their opportunity to scoop up DoubleClick and a couple of other key purchases. They let them slip through. Google snapped them up, and the rest is billions and trillions later, folks. Right? And as simple as that. Forget about buying Google, right? This was the opportunity to stop Google finding a business model, which they failed to do. And they of course then came riding in later, with their big ass checkbook, bought and just burned so much wealth and startups. But in a similar fashion. Anyway, the point to tell the story is not about mistakes made in the past. It's that I think this time around they've done a lot better. Whoever is running M&A, Microsoft, my opinion, fucking killed it with their deal with OpenAI. Right? Let's get real.
Let's just be clear. It's Satya. Satya is the guy. He's running M&A.
Okay, fine.
When I went to the first developer day at OpenAI, Satya came out on stage. It was surprised. No one knew. Satya came out with Sama. They talked. They hugged like bros. They talked about their contract. Just so people understand, fronted OpenAI about $10+ billion. I don't think all of it was cash. All of it was just data center access, GPUs for training Azure, right? And in return, Microsoft has access to every generation of GPT. First, their stuff runs on Azure, right? So basically, Azure is basically serving Copilot and serving ChatGPT, right? Microsoft profits. But I think there's this shadowy stuff. You know who saved? You know who saved OpenAI when they had the board breakup?
Who?
Microsoft.
Right.
Microsoft first said, this is game theory. Microsoft first said, we're going to hire everyone who leaves. Safe harbor, right?
Yep.
And then behind the scenes, because this was Satya's deal was going to break up. He had already spent $10-20 billion on this. He could not allow this to happen. It was like, it would be the worst. He would have been fired. He would have been fired. And so they found out a way to manipulate and save Sama's seat as CEO of OpenAI. Or the threat was he will simply compete with you and rebuild the same thing. You have all the CPUs, will cut off the old OpenAI. So it was like game theory. This was mass. One day someone's going to write a book about it, or no, a movie, and it's going to be amazing. And so Microsoft has access to AGI technology. Whenever it appears, they get it first.
Okay.
So unlike the ad tech where we try to build Overture, I was at Microsoft at the time. Microsoft is not building anything, but they have access to everything. And so given their sales team in Office and Windows, they just set to profit from this. So bottom line, people, invest in Microsoft.
It's like, really? I was like, where is he going with this? But okay, good. I got it.
I don't have anything to do with the company anymore. I do own stock. I have to tell you right now.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, you burn a few $1 billion, you learn something, I guess. So
no. Look, and I just want to tell people, because it's inside stuff. When we failed to stop Google, because we saw Google literally come up from nothing, all the executives of Microsoft learned the lessons of failure, why we failed. And I think that every single one who paid attention was poised to do this kind of thing. We didn't want to make the same mistake again. We failed at Hailstorm, which was enterprise identity. We failed at ads. Those were like the biggest Bill Gates driven failures, and we all learned the lesson of them. Anyway, move on. So, what other angle do we want to explore about this? Let me give you, let's do sort of lightning round. We've
Mm-hmm.
talked about a hype cycle and where it's going. We talked about a few interesting stories, Microsoft and how it benefits, and the different players. What would you advise anyone that we've mentioned, any party, any of the ones we haven't mentioned, about how to navigate the bubble busting? And is the bubble really busting, or is that just a sexy headline? Like, what's your advice
Well, I
that
certainly think
we
it's
haven't
affecting
talked about
headline.
already?
You
Yeah,
know, look, like, Gartner has their hype cycle, right? You know, this is perfectly fitting that, right? So this is not a bust. This is part of, right? So certainly that. But Esne, you're the one that I think is good about giving the advice. So I pass that to you. What do you got? What do you got?
So I guess I always look back at what's happened in the past and try and figure out, okay, through that lens, what would I think about in the early 2000s with the .com. In the end, infrastructure, right, won out, right? So that's one learning. And when I think about SaaS as a whole, I thought understanding good use cases and also making sure your ROI and a revenue model. Those are people who won, right? And then when we think about Web 3.0, I don't know if anybody can say, are we still in the trouble of disillusionment for Web 3.0 or not?
we
A
we
lot of
canceled Web 3.0. It's dead.
sorry.
Web 3.0 died.
I mean, much of the hype was speculative, but there are some durable use cases, right, that prove that decentralization, can be better. And I know we don't have a lot of people in developing countries who could leverage this technology, but it exists. Now we know, we'll find good applications. But when I think of all three of those scenarios, and you mentioned ad tech, um, Ted, I think the important thing is really be clear on those who have the core infrastructure, distribution, technology, etc. Right? Make investments there. If you can play in that space, great. The second is really, like we talk about this, make sure you're solving a true sharp problem, right? It has to be a really important problem. And again, companies exist to generate profit in a way that delights its customers as well as adds value to society, et cetera, right? Definitely also think about, is the work being done truly? You have to have this discipline of asking oneself, is there true ROI in this work that is to be done? Right? If it doesn't save money, if it doesn't save time, if it doesn't grow revenue, we all know it won't last. It will get cut out, right? I mentioned this earlier, focus on operational excellence and execution discipline. I've seen that work forever. It just does. And the way I think about it is that I don't think that the hype, of what we're going through, I don't think it's a place where I think of it as a filter. What we're going through right now is not killing companies, filtering them for and making us sharper in finding true value. So I think that's where we are, and we should use that lens. And again, is it a sharp problem? Is it generating ROI? That, like, honestly, if you want to be responsible right now, that's what everybody should be thinking about. That's my thought.
Okay. Okay. I love it. I love it. And I want to maybe build on it because I have a few rapid fire thoughts I feel were just going to explode out of my brain. One was I remember Calendly. When Calendly started, it was in the shadow of the Great Recession. And I know Tope focused on what is sharp, what is important. Scheduling sales calls, for example, was the thing. It was so lossy, and he built something that could work and was good. A lot of people built maybe 4 or 5 companies I knew. Hey, Ted, there was this company in New York during my time in Connecticut, X.AI, that if you CC'd Amy, it will try to schedule with you.
Yeah, I remember.
5 years later, the founder called me. I'd met him then. He tried to hire me actually way before Tope did, and he rejected me. 5 years later, he called me when I was a chief product officer at Calendly, trying to figure out if he could hire me back and if I could tell him the secrets of Calendly's success, basically. So what I was saying is that Ezinne mentioned focusing on sharp problems, that basically any kind of hype bubble is a filter for value. And I just wanted to spiked the point. In the shadow of the Great Recession, Hope started a company that would help salespeople schedule better. And he wasn't the only one who was working on this at the time. There was this weird company, X.AI. I had interviewed with them, and I think it didn't work out. And 4 years later, when I was chief work officer at Calendly, they called me because I was trying to find the secrets of Calendly's success because they went before Calendly. You know, that makes sense. And eventually they died. And the reason was that even though they had a sharp problem, the execution of that sharp problem was subpar, and they didn't really understand the customer. And so not only do you have to have a sharp problem, you have to have insight into customers in order to create value. And hype bubbles busting really stresses people and founders who do that. And so this is just for the builders, is, like, find a sharp problem, understand the customer enough to execute it in a way that they have value from. So that's one piece of advice. We've always talked about this. The other one is, if you are an investor, invest in things that are not bubbly, that have no value that you can see. I mean, I think this feels obvious, although when everyone is investing and making money, basically be like Warren Buffett, right? He's holding a lot of powder to the side because of this bubble risk, I believe. And so I think people should think about that. The greatest investor of all time, what is he doing? And I don't know if you're better than he is. I mean,
Right.
just think a lot about that. Dream about it if you can. The other thing is, there are parts of this thing which is like independence, autonomy agents that are still like super hypey of everything that's hypey. And so it has to come down to the value it creates with people. Like, as people build and invest in this stuff, Phalanx Ventures are taking a look at personalization of agents because we're making bets that the current ones aren't very good. We don't even know if we're completely right, but we just want to make them better, more useful for people. And we're thinking about that. Um, what other advice do I have? I think the other thing is, like, a lot of value will come from operational stuff like we talked about, right? Like, what makes AI interesting, at a high level, is that it increases productivity, right? That's it. And so AI is one of those like weird, harmful, like we saw internet benefit everyone in the world. We saw social, let's call it, benefit everyone in the world. Location, benefit everyone in the world. AI is one of those things that sort of creates more losers sometimes. Because here's the thing: the developed world will not be able to create as many powerful AI, and so unless they buy expensive AI from the West, they're gonna be behind, and that's dangerous if you think about the planet. If you think as a human being. We also, AI is biased. It only has the things that are on the internet, and a lot of it is only 20% of, and it's all Western knowledge that's on the internet. There's no Aboriginal knowledge. It's an ancient Chinese knowledge that's not on the internet. And so we're seeing this weird skewing of what it can do, what it knows. Um, I think people who try to solve that problem, who bring that data in and make it useful for everybody, it will be very important, not just for profit, but for the planet. And so maybe I'd like to see that bubble blow up versus the one.
Well, well, be careful what you say.
I'm going to go back to 10.
So just on that point, I think about the Western aspect of AI, even though it's developed by China, right? Still, it is with certainly Western characteristics that they would say, and
Hmm.
the let's not forget that AI, in many ways, is now finding an answer to what the hell do we do with all these data centers, right? In the same way that crypto did. It was like, what the hell are we going to do with all this compute power? Says Jensen Huang. And it's like, well, let's sell it to crypto guys. Well, all right. And then that came up and down, up and down. Oh, well, let's sell it to AI guys. So, in many ways, we had power, compute power, right? And we didn't have the power, electricity behind it to do it. Now, the whole world is scrambling to be much more efficient at delivering both types of power so that then we can then use it for something productive, hopefully, right? But that is an incredibly Western ambition, because that ambition leads you to just plow over basically anything and replace it with compute. Ultimately, with this is like, there's so many AI stories about like Dyson spheres and computronium or whatever, about like basically replace everything with just compute power, right? And then with that you can just like manage and control the universe. Anyway,
Oh, scary.
yeah, it
Don't
does
want
sound
that world.
scary. And you know, you get to what Zuckerberg says, which is not this, but it's equally scary in a different way. Anyway, but that's not where I want to go with my advice. I just want to comment on that. I think the advice that I want to give people is slow down and think carefully about what you are doing here, right? When you know, it sometimes feels more painful, and certainly it is slower to think deeply about what are sharp problems and work on sharp problems and work on the tough things and really focus on execution when you are out there seeing literally billions of valuation for ideas and for things that are very sexy. They're things that are very bubbly. And, you know, builders can sit there and go, you know, really, should I be a builder? This is no different than, you know, the Warren Buffett of the world. And even Warren Buffett, I'm sure, you know, looks at somebody else and goes, well, geez, that guy's really having a lot of success. Like, maybe I need to think about, do I need to change the approach that I've been doing? And then he's like, screw it, I'm just going to have a Coke and a hamburger and I'm good to go, right? And I think people need to be that way too, i.e. disciplined about not riding into where they see the hype build, because even Sam Altman, right, the king of hype, look what happened to him. And you think you're better at hype than that dude? You are not. Okay, so if you're not better than him at hype and he hit a reckoning, you're going to hit a reckoning. So you're better off trying to be a builder, trying to really engineer and think about where you're best positioned to solve the problem. What is the right problem to solve? How am I going to execute against that? How am I going to integrate that and roll this out? And that's going to build actual enterprise value. It's slower, it's not as sexy, but it's got a much higher chance of success.
Mhm.
Honestly, this is actually when the noise kind of burns off, and the companies and leaders who stay disciplined. I've said that word so many times, right? Those who stay disciplined, they're the ones who are going to build the foundation for the next decade. Handling this phase with focusing on ROI. We haven't talked about trust, right? We know and have learned a lot from social media on top of the internet, right? And we know that trust, security, all these things are really important. Again, those who work on some of those things are going to be rewarded. So ROI, trust, sharp problems. I think the important thing also is to watch for like over skepticism, right? Don't chase all the shiny objects, right? Most of the folks who won were those who quietly built during the disillusionment. They stayed. I talk about winners quietly cementing their leadership in times like this. Another thing I want to make sure I say this: your talent, your people will be tired. So you've got to figure out how you keep them interested, engaged during this time, because they too will go through the emotional ups and downs. So you can do that if you're able to focus them on a real enduring problem. So go look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, look at the OSI layers, all the things that are true fundamentals. Go back to those. I think that's what can get folks.
Okay, you guys have been talking caution, including me, for the last 10 minutes. So let's leave on a high note.
Yeah.
What's the next bubble going to be? Yeah, and look, it's just like either talk about what's the next bubble and who are the winners, bubble or no. Just want you to talk about that as we leave.
Interesting. Well, you already said it's going to be agent related, right?
As in bubble or winners?
No, it's bubble.
Oh
Isn't it?
wow. I don't know that agents are the. That's a whole conversation. That's a
No, you don't
whole
get to critique. Just say what you think the next bubble is.
what the next bubble is.
Yeah, whether in AI or something else.
I can't think of anything. I don't think like that. I can't think of
So
anything.
who are the winners? Bubble or no? Like regardless, I already sort of mentioned Microsoft. Any other the winners you see, no matter what happens? Like we think data centers might be winners,
No matter what happens.
but we also see like smaller models gaining ground that need less energy. So not sure. Who are the winners? Either way. Who's gonna make money coming or going?
I think that folks who work on the trust layer or what trust means in this world, AI will win. I'm giving all my data. What does that mean?
Yeah, right. Interesting.
So, yes.
Well,
Ted and I have a meeting about trust next week called Will It Work, which we're talking about
see.
zero trust, zero reason AI trust. So
Yeah.
you're not in that meeting, and so I feel hopeful that you think trust is important because we think
Yeah.
trust is important.
Yeah.
Well, let's say distribution again, right? We said it earlier. I'm going to say it again. The winners are the ones with the distribution.
Distribution.
Yeah.
The
It makes me
arbiter of
sad
trust.
because there's usually the incumbents, but I think you're right.
You're right. I think you're right. I think distribution is going to be key. Again, the reason so if we are the data and companies are the data, somebody has to be the broker or arbiter, right? That's why I keep thinking. Who
But you
says,
know,
Are you sure?
OpenAI, OpenAI.
Blockchain, man. We got blockchain. It's out there.
oh my God.
Come on. Anyway.
All right, guys. On that note, we are wrapping up this podcast. Check us out at Product Mind or CEO and Substack. We're starting to put out stuff on Spotify as a series. We call it podcast, I guess, and YouTube. Check us out, and we'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.
Bye. Y'all take care.